episode number 42. Hi, you're listening to the Careers Beyond Motherhood podcast with your host, Janine Esbrand. I'm here to help working mums like you to thrive in your careers and in motherhood. I share tips, strategies, and inspirational conversations with awesome women to help reduce the struggle in your juggle.
Time for a say, Mummy.
Hello, and welcome to the show. It is great to be back with you once again. Today, I'm really excited about the episode and our upcoming guest because this is the first interview that I've done with a man on the show. So we are flipping the script, and instead of focusing on a career beyond motherhood, we're going to be focusing on a career beyond fatherhood. So we are speaking to Reid, who is a director of Hybrid Legal, which is a non-traditional law firm which is pushing boundaries in the legal industry and showing how flexible working can really work on a practical level. So in this episode, you'll hear me speak to Alan about how his desire for flexibility led him to leave his role working for a large PLC to transition to working for Hybrid Legal, and how his role now allows him the flexibility to spend more time with his family. We also really hear about the male perspective on the work-life balance debate. We're often hearing about women, we're often hearing about the struggles from our perspective, but it's really refreshing to hear how dads feel about dad guilt and how they feel about not being able to see their children, or the struggles that come with juggling your career with family life. So without further ado, let's jump right in and hear from Alan. Hi, Alan. Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited that you're here. Please, could you introduce yourself to our audience?
Thanks, Janine. Well, I'm delighted to join you as well. So I'm a director at Hybrid Legal. I've been with Hybrid for 3 years, and I co-own and run that business along with my business partner, Ryan Lisk. Like lots of small businesses, I've got a sort of multitude of different roles. I do business development. I'm also the FD, and I also do marketing and also people management as well. So I've got a kind of broad range of roles. My background is not law, though. I come from a financial services background. So I was in that industry for 28 years, and I worked for latterly Standard Life, where I ran corporate distribution or corporate sales for 10 years in the UK. So that's a bit about me.
Awesome. So one of the questions I often ask my guests, because I normally interview mothers on the show, is how motherhood has affected their career or made any impact on their career. So it would be great to ask you, because we never really hear from dads. People don't often ask, how are you managing things as a working dad? So for you, I know that you're a father of 3. So has being a parent impacted your career in any way?
Yes, I think it has, definitely. So I do have 3 children. My eldest daughter is 18, and then I have 2 younger children who are 11 and 8, respectively. I've got a further sort of challenge in as much as my eldest daughter is actually from my first marriage, and she lives with her mum in East Anglia. And I live in Chandler's Road in Southampton. So, and that's been the case for a number of years, but we've got a great relationship and I see a lot of her. But that traveling to see her and bring her down to be with my my family has also had some implications over the years. One of the reasons that I wanted to get out of working for Standard Life and a big PLC, and I had a relatively senior job at Standard Life. I was a director of the firm. Was because I found that I was spending a lot of time away from home. So typically that looked like being in Edinburgh or London for 2 to 3 nights a week, which in some respects doesn't sound that much. And I know other people are away from home a lot longer. But when you combine that with a sort of busy and stressful job, and I think the time it takes to kind of prepare to go away on a Monday or a Tuesday, and then also reconnect with the house and the family when you come back, having been away for 2 or 3 nights, actually it takes up a very significant proportion of your week. And I was finding that personally, having done that for 10 years, 2 things. One, I was a little bit tired of all that traveling. And secondly, I felt that as my children were beginning to get a little bit older, I wasn't having enough time with them.
Mm.
And so I had the opportunity to kind of escape the clutches of PLC land. And I was already involved with hybrid as a non-exec director. And then I had the opportunity to get out, and I took it. And that allowed me to go and work for hybrid full time. And I've really, really enjoyed not being away from home and spending more time with my wife and my kids, and working flexibly. I work from home quite regularly when I need to, also in our office in Southampton. So I'm working from home today, for example. So uh, obviously I don't have the same experience as a lot of your listeners, but I can really empathize with the challenges of trying to manage a career and also responsibilities as a parent.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It's really great to hear the other side and the other perspective, in terms of it's not just mums who want to spend time with their children, it's also dads too. So it's good to hear how you made that transition because you were feeling like you weren't spending enough time with your family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a little bit of a stigma sometimes attached to that. I think for dads, maybe, I don't want to make an over sort of generalization really, but it's not something that you hear a lot of fathers talking about. The fact that, especially at more senior levels where they're trying to really sort of pursue that career, they can be very career focused, I think, and it's not often, in my experience, certainly at that kind of level, that you hear a man saying, well, career's going really well, and the job's going really well, and I'm really enjoying it, but you know what? I don't get much time at home, or I don't get to see my kids that much. I don't recall having many of those conversations when I worked for a big PLC.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really important area, and I think it's maybe something that more dads will talk about, and that sort of links in with aspects of the law, as you'll know, Janine, in terms of things like paternity leave, etc.
Yeah, I think you're right. So with shared parental leave coming in, looking at the stats, it's almost, compared to other countries that are doing it, in the UK, it's only 1% of dads that are taking it up. And so we really need that to improve. And I think that's going to improve when we see more men doing it and more men talking about it as a positive thing. I think the stigma will then be able to kind of be removed a bit, and people will actually say, actually, I would like to do it. But I think right now we're at a place where not many men want to put their hand up and say, yeah, I do want to take a few months out. And that doesn't mean I'm any less committed to my career. It just means I want to spend time with my family.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing, just to share with you actually, is that there's a kind of further change for us as a family coming along, because my wife has actually literally just been offered a job yesterday, having not worked for 7 years. The kids are getting a little bit older now. My younger daughter is about to go to secondary, and she has been offered a job with a local company, and something that she's really passionate about doing. And I suppose the point of telling you this is that there's no way that I think we would be able to make that work as a family were it not for the fact that I've got a bit of flexibility now in terms of my role. So she's not working full time, she's going to be working 9 till 3. It's quite exciting, I think, for us and for her to get back into work, really. So that's another sort of interesting dynamic that's going on for us at the moment.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm excited for her. It's nice, especially if she's been out for 7 years, to say, actually, yes, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do something that I'm passionate about. So that's exciting. So can you tell us a bit more about Hybrid Legal? I really like the ethos of the firm and the way that you run. So it'd be good for you to share a bit with the audience, kind of how it's set up and how your business model is a bit different from a traditional law firm.
Thanks, Janine. Yes, I'll tell you a little bit about Hybrid. So Hybrid are a law firm, but as we like to say, not as you would know it. We have a different model, and I'll tell you about that in a second. Effectively, what we do is we provide legal services for small to medium-sized businesses. So that's our core market. We do deal with startups and small businesses up to $1 million in turnover, but a lot of our clients are in the 1 to 20 million turnover category. And we provide services in 4 core areas: corporate, so corporate transactions; commercial, anything to do with the trading relationship of the client; intellectual property; and employment and HR. So those are the 4 practice areas we focus on. What makes us different is there's probably half a dozen or so things that make us different. The first thing is we only ever operate on fixed fees. So we don't charge clients by the hour, and SMEs in particular really like that model. because it gives them certainty about what they're going to pay and they can manage their cash flow accordingly. The second thing that makes us different is the way that we are structured. So we have a fairly small team in our kind of head office, if you like. That sounds a bit grandiose because we are a small business, but there's a small team in there's half a dozen of us in the office. But our legal expertise is delivered by a team of self-employed associates who predominantly work from home. They have expertise in those particular 4 disciplines that I talked about. And broadly speaking, we've got 2 in each of those disciplines that we use on a very regular basis, so about 8. But we have another 4 or so, bringing the complement up to about 12 that we use less frequently. Of that team, 2/3 of them are women who have either worked in a regional law firm or in a city law firm, and who've taken time away from their career to start a family, to have children, and then have wanted to come back into the legal profession, but not working on a full-time basis, or certainly not working the kind of demands from an hours perspective that you would expect to see in that environment. So whatever, 50 hours or plus a week, they just can't do that. They need the flexibility because of wanting to spend time with their children, obviously, and childcare commitments. So what is great from our perspective with that model is that it keeps our overhead low because they're working from home, as opposed to us working in a larger office and providing all the facilities for them. They can work flexibly at a time that suits them. So that's, ideal from our perspective. And we get access to women who are very experienced and expertise in their particular field, which is obviously fantastic for our clients. So we find, and that has client benefits in terms of the flexible way in which these associates work, but also to the bottom line, because typically we can provide the kind of service that one might get at a senior associate or partner, one-off partner level at a typical law firm, but at a value point that might be 20 or 25% less, being open about that. So we find that that's a model that really works for us. Although they are self-employed, we try to treat them like they're part of the business. So they're engaged in the business, in the direction of the business. We ask them to input into lots of areas, as I think you've seen, because I put some of those associates in contact with you on the survey that you were doing recently. So that's really how we're different. So that model around fixed fees and that different operating model, and also our focus. I suppose a couple of other things just to throw in. We have a different sort of brand and culture to most law firms. So we try to be as unlike a traditional law firm as we can. We're a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more fun in the way that we dress, and we try to use language that ordinary people would appreciate and understand and avoid legalese. We don't wear suits typically, we wear jeans and shirts. So a different kind of brand we try to differentiate from others. And I suppose the final point to make is that you may be aware that there's some regulatory change coming down the line. So the SRA have been consulting in conjunction with the Commission and Markets Authority about changing the regulatory landscape and allowing solicitors who are qualified as such to hold themselves out or represent themselves as solicitors, even if they work in a non-regulated firm. Mm-hmm. Whereas at the moment, you cannot call yourself a solicitor or refer to yourself as a solicitor if you work in an unregulated firm. And that's going to change, and that is expected to be introduced in the spring of 2019. And we see ourselves at the kind of forefront of that change because we're not a regulated firm, but we do have solicitors that work for us and they are regulated in their own right. But until this change, we haven't been able to call them such. And I'll just finish that point by saying we applied to go early, and we are working with the SRA in what they call their innovation space to actually affect that change ahead of time. And we're only one of 10 firms in the UK that are doing things like that, working with the SRA. So that's quite exciting as well.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's so great to hear about the innovation and the different approach. I attended a roundtable discussion earlier on this week at with the Law Society, and we were looking at ways to improve women being able to climb the ranks in the legal industry. So we were talking about some of the challenges, and some of the things that came up were things around like the billable hour and how that makes it difficult for people to maybe work flexibly because you're compared against your peers who might be able to be working longer hours. And we talked about the need for flexibility, but what the challenges are around that, with the mindset that people have. You know, some old school managers feel like you need to be in the office and in the same space in order to be effective. So it's really good to hear that you're making it work not only for your consultants but also for your clients. That you mentioned that it's working well for the end user of the legal services. So that's really good to hear. And I think law firms need to realize that we don't necessarily have to stick to the old model of billable hour and people just being at their desk all the time. There's definitely ways that you can still delight your clients and work flexibly.
Absolutely, yeah, no, I totally agree. And to be honest with you, flexible working is probably something that we'll do more of in terms of the employed team as well, because we're growing. We have law graduates who come in and look after our retained clients, because we also offer a subscription-based service called Legal Plus, where you get on-demand legal guidance, for example. And we align a client, what we call a client partner, or some people might call a client manager, to look after those clients. And they're typically law graduates. So we're also creating opportunities for a different kind of job for law grads as well, rather than doing a sort of paralegal, probably copying lots of boring documents and things like that, the sort of thing. So they come and do that role for us, and they get direct exposure to clients. As we grow that team, because we are growing as a business, I can see us doing more with the employed team and saying, actually, you can work from home. And, you know, it's that old adage, Janine, isn't it? You know, work is something that I do, not somewhere that I go to.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a debate in the office at the moment, especially between Ryan and I, because on the one hand, you could say we might need a bigger office. On the other hand, we might not, because more of our team might work from home. So we'll see how that pans out.
It's awesome. Could you share any kind of tips for the working parent? So someone who's working, juggling it all, and maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed by the demands that come with trying to do the juggle, because let's be honest, it isn't easy being a working parent. So you've been through it, you're in it. So are there any tips that you would share with our audience around that?
I could certainly share some things to be aware of. I think whether or not I can give you tips, I'll speak from the heart in terms of my experience. One of the things that I find really difficult, and it's not so much, and that is that when I come home and I've got a lot in my mind, or when I'm working from home, especially in the summer holidays. So I'm at home at the moment, and my two kids are in. My wife's in at the moment. I think they're going out shortly. And my lad, Dan, is 8 years old, and he'll trot into my office and say, "Dad, can we go and play in Hornby trains?" And I have to say no. And I find that really difficult. Because it just makes me feel guilty that I'm not allocating the time. And I think it plays also to this sort of sometimes on, you know, maybe the rise of social media. I've watched a few things recently about this topic where, you know, there's a lot of pressure, I think, on parents to, you know, have a fabulous, especially women, to have a fabulous career and also be a brilliant parent and spend loads of time with your kids and play games with them and do all creative things and also produce wonderful meals, you know, father or mother, you know, and all that stuff, you know, and I think a lot of people just beat themselves up sometimes. I know I do about, you know, am I trying to do too much and just ending up being rubbish at everything? I think one thing I need to remind myself of from time to time is that sometimes it's just a little amount of time that Daniel, for example, wants. You know, he doesn't necessarily want an hour and a half. And sometimes I've tried to I try and say yes more. So I'll try and sort of take a break out of what I'm doing and, you know, say, yeah, let's go and play with the train set for 20 minutes. And just that little amount of time, actually, if I can take a break from what I'm doing, it's not always possible, but that little amount of time, A, makes him a really happy, you know, son, and B, makes me feel that I'm not a rubbish dad. So I think, I suppose my top tip would be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Don't immerse yourself in social media because you only see the good bits, not all challenging bits, and just do what you can. And that would be my main piece of advice.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think we do that. We do beat ourselves up so much. But when you think about it, the fact that you're thinking whether or not you should have done that means that you can't be a bad parent because you're actually thinking about your child's best interest and you're thinking about ways that you can spend more time with them. And so if it's on the radar, then you must be someone who cares, right? So I think we need to cut ourselves some slack and realize that sometimes the kids, they will demand attention a lot, but if we can give them a little bit of time, they're happy with that, and then we can go back to what we're doing. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, which I think we sometimes feel like, okay, I'm at home, so really I should be paying 100% attention. But things have to get done. Like my son will happily have me sit down and play with him, but we have to eat, so therefore I have to go and cook and play with you for the whole afternoon. So yeah, I think we have to realize that we can't do it all the time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think the other thing as well is, I think in business now, I find that more and more, if I'm honest and just say, actually, sorry, there's a bit of noise in the background. Can you bear with me 1 second? And I turn away from the conference call I'm on or the phone call I'm on, and I say to Daniel, don't come into the office right now, which he's not supposed to do, but he doesn't always manage to follow that particular rule. Anyway, so he comes in and I turn away from a call or whatever I might be doing when I'm interacting with a client, and I have to just sort of say, oh, sorry, bear with me a second. It's quite surprising, actually, how the vast majority of people that you deal with at whatever level have got no issue with that whatsoever and just totally understand what it's like. Not everybody, but the vast majority. And I think sometimes we all want to sort of give this impression of the swan gliding along the water in a very professional manner. In actual fact, it's all a bit turbulent underneath the water, isn't it? And but you know what? In my experience, most people get that and understand that, often because they've been through it themselves. And so I suppose another thing I would say, if you can call it advice or a tip, is you don't be too concerned about that. And I think, if anything, it just shows that you've got a human side and a life outside of whatever it is work-wise that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And people often forget that when you're doing business with other people, and we're all humans. So people can connect with you more sometimes if they see that other side of you. So it's not always something to shy away from. Sometimes it's good to embrace it, depending on the circumstance. So I like to ask people whether or not they have any inspirational quotes that they hold on to, or that they remember, that they can share, because I love them. I love quotes. I love to hold on to them and share them with people at appropriate moments. So do you have one that you could share?
I do. I'm not a massive fan of poetry, really, if I'm honest with you. Although, funnily enough, when I was a young, when I was at school, I used to write poetry. But anyway, maybe that's something I'll pick up again in my retirement. But there's a particular poem that I've always sort of found, and in some respects it's very well known, and it could even be described as a cliche, but a poem called "If" by Rudyard Kipling, which many people will be very familiar with, I'm sure. And there's a particular line or two lines within that poem, and those lines are: "If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same," I think is very, very powerful, because I was in sales basically for 25 years in financial services. And a lot of what I did in the latter part of my career was quite big at what I would describe as institutional sales. So you're working with FTSE 100 companies or their equivalents, and it's kind of 5 or 6 wins is the difference between zero and hero in a year. So it was quite intense at times, and I always used to think of it as that roller coaster of the crushing blow of losing an opportunity, and then the sort of the high of winning. And that's part of sales, and I'm still in sales now, because I do business development. We're trying to win clients as a company and grow. But I think as I've got older, and I'm 50 in October, I've probably learned to kind of flatten out the highs of winning and the lows of losing a little bit better. Because fundamentally, without getting too philosophical, I'm not sure life's necessarily about winning and losing. It's about the journey and how much you enjoy it along the way, really.
I love that. That is such a good perspective. But like you said, it takes a while to get there, right? You change your perspective over time. But yeah, it's really, really good to think of things in that way.
Yeah.
It's been so good interviewing you today, Alan. I've learned a lot, and I think your perspective is going to be something that's refreshing for our audience to hear. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm a big fan of what you're doing. Very keen to continue to collaborate, and very grateful to you commenting and giving me your perspectives on some of the blogs that I've been writing about. I do want to talk more about that, and particularly about the whole subject of women working in the legal profession and following having children, etc. So I hope we'll get to spend more time, as I say, collaborating in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. It was so great to interview Alan and to hear his perspective. I think there are not enough men joining the conversation around flexibility and flexible working. And it is awesome to hear from him, one, how it's impacted him in his personal life, but also how his firm is doing great things to accommodate flexibility, and how his firm is showing that it's possible for you to work flexibly and for clients to be happy and for relationships to be maintained with clients, even if you're not working the traditional 9 to 5 model. So for anyone who's listening, who's out there, who's at a firm, or who is a lawyer who's looking at how they can possibly work more flexibly, then I hope that you found some inspiration in this episode. Now, if you want to learn more about Alan and connect with him, or learn more about hybrid legal, then I'm going to be putting links in the show notes. So head over to lightboxcoaching.com/episode 42, and then you can grab the link. Quick question for you. Have you joined the Careers Beyond Motherhood community? Okay, that's all from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. As always, it's lovely spending time with you. If you are enjoying the show, please do head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review. Why? Because every rating and review helps more people to find the show and join in the conversation. Okay, it's time to say goodbye for this week. I hope you have an awesome week, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the next episode. But until then, look after you and look after your babies. This podcast features music from Ben Sound.